Welcome to Shin-Hong's International Law Infographics. In today's video, we are going to talk about this topic: why Taiwan can't join WHO, its reason and solution. Let's get started. In December 2019, a deadly disease attacking respirational system appeared in Wuhan city of China. This disease then escalated into a pandemic called COVID-19. As of 17th February of 2020, more than 70,000 people have caught this disease, and among them, more than 1,700 were killed. Besides the shocking number of deaths, there's another issue attracting people's attention: Taiwan. Although considered as an independent country by its residents and many people around the world, Taiwan is considered as a region of China by the WHO and cannot join the WHO as a member state. Its digits about COVID-19 are included in the statistics of China. On the information table, Taiwan is labeled as Taipei and environs of China. Simply put, in the eyes of WHO, Taiwan is a province of China, a part of China. Many people consider this an issue of geopolitics, including the majority of people on Taiwan. Politicians condemn China for blocking Taiwan's participation in this crisis. The WHO secretary was also criticized for his pro-China attitude. Nevertheless, the WHO's decision is not 100% political, but involves international power struggle, international legal system, and historical stories. In fact, in this scene, the legal element plays a role more important than most people think. Let's start from the history. The source of problem was planted in 1895. After losing the First Sino-Japanese War, the Empire of China signed a peace treaty called Treaty of Shimonoseki with the Empire of Japan on 17 April 1895. In this treaty, there were two things related to current topic. First, China agreed to cede Taiwan to Japan. And second, people on Taiwan were granted 2 years to decide their nationality. On 8 May 1895, the Treaty of Shimonoseki entered into force. The territorial sovereignty of the region on Taiwan under the Empire of China's control was officially transferred to Japan. Later, on 8 May 1897, under the clause of nationality selection, all Chinese nationals still living on Taiwan then became subjects of the Empire of Japan. When Empire of China ceded Taiwan to Empire of Japan, a great part of Taiwan was controlled by indigenous peoples. Japan did not gain sovereignty over these lands from China. During 1910 and 1915, through military power and other methods, Japan gained control over these lands and finally acquired the sovereignty over the whole Taiwan island. These were the territories of Empire of Japan before she took action to fulfill her ambition of Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Since 1931, Japan invaded many parts of Asia and the Pacific. By attacking U.S. Pearl Harbor in 1941, Japan became the common enemy of the Allies. Then, in 1945, 8 days after 2 atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan officially surrendered on 15 August 1945. Before Japan started her initiative, Asia and the Pacific were the house of colonies. By aggressive expansion, Japan created the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere drawn on this map. Here, the sovereign territories of Japan are in red. Regions in pink are lands occupied by Japan during the World War II. The brown block is Thailand. It's a member of the World War II Axis. After Japan's surrender, along with Directive No. 1 issued by General MacArthur, the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, SCAP, General Order No. 1, the plan depicting the Allies' post-surrender occupation plan of Japan, was made public. According to this plan, sovereign territories of Japan and the land she gained control by the end of war were occupied by four major members of the Allies: US, UK, China, and Russia. This is a closer look of the military occupation plan of the Japan's sovereign territories. From here, we can see that Taiwan was planned to be occupied by China, the Republic of China. On 25 October 1945, after the Allies' ceremony of surrender, an entity of the Allies' military occupation was set up in Taiwan by the Republic of China. Its name was TPEO, Taiwan Provincial Executive Office. What? Taiwan Provincial? Does this mean that Taiwan has become the Taiwan province, a province of China since that day? The answer is no. Although the Republic of China named the Allies' military occupation entity in this way, Taiwan was still part of Japan at that time. Its sovereignty was not changed. Here comes the International Law 101. According to international law, territorial sovereignty cannot be transferred simply by military occupation. What actually happened on 25 October 1945 was a transfer of administration power. By setting up an entity for the Allies' military occupation, the power to administer Taiwan, not its sovereignty, was transferred from Japan's local government in Taiwan to the Allies' military occupation entity. Let's use a metaphor. Say you bought a fancy LCD TV with a powerful remote control from local shop. One day your selfish bullying big brother asks you to give him the remote control because dad said you watch TV too much. Because it's your dad's order, you gave him the remote control. You see, although you gave him the controller and lost the power to control TV channel, legally you still own the TV. Later, because your selfish brother loved your TV so much, he decided to put stickers on it to claim its ownership. As you know, the stickers attached could not change the TV's ownership. It's still yours. With the same logic, Japan gained Taiwan from China in 1895 and governed Taiwan with her administration power. Following the Allies' victory, the Republic of China, as an agent of the Allies' military occupation, requested Japan's local government in Taiwan to transfer the administration power to it. As the losing party of the war, Japan could only yield the controlling power to the Allies' agent. However, Japan didn't lose the sovereignty of Taiwan because of this. She still owned Taiwan. Out of its ambition of territorial expansion, the Republic of China put labels like Taiwan Province on Taiwan to claim its ownership. Even so, this label couldn't change the sovereignty of Taiwan. Legally, Taiwan was still part of Japan. So, how dare China? Well, that's because during the war, on 1st December 1943, the head of states of the United States, United Kingdom, and the Republic of China had a meeting in Cairo and announced a wartime statement of intent called Cairo Communique, aka Cairo Declaration, at the meeting. In this statement of intent, the heads of these three states announced their willingness of having military cooperation with each other and said that once they won the war, Japan shall be stripped of all Pacific islands she gained since 1914, return Manchuria, Formosa aka Taiwan, the Pescadores aka Penghu to the Republic of China, and finally Japan should let Korea be free and independent. Later, on 26 July 1945, the heads of states of the United States, the United Kingdom, the Republic of China, and the USSR collectively made another wartime statement of intent called Potsdam Declaration. In this statement of intent, they expressed their intention to eliminate Japan's militarism, occupy Japan to achieve certain objectives like transforming the governmental structure of Japan, carry out terms in Cairo Declaration, disarm Japanese military force, remove obstacles to democracy, and finally they ask for Japan's unconditional surrender. Later, after Japan surrendered, on 2nd September 1945, the representative of the Allies and Japan signed an armistice agreement called the Instrument of Surrender. In this armistice agreement, Japan announced her unconditional surrender to the Allied powers, ordered her force to surrender, undertook to carry out in good faith the provision of the Potsdam Declaration, and the liberal of all Allied powers prisoners. Furthermore, when the SCAP led by General MacArthur drafted the General Order No. 1, i.e., the Allies' post-surrender occupation plan, the intention expressed in the Cairo Declaration was considered. Hence, in point 1a of the occupation arrangement, senior Japanese commander and all ground, sea, air, and auxiliary force within Formosa were instructed to surrender to the top military commander of the Republic of China, Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. So because of Cairo Declaration, Potsdam Declaration, and Instrument of Surrender, the Republic of China believed that Taiwan would be returned to China. Well, having this kind of expectation is okay. However, when Japanese force on Taiwan surrendered to the Allies agent, the Republic of China, according to the General Order No. 1, although the Republic of China labeled the Allies military occupation entity as an entity of the Taiwan province of China, saying that Taiwan has been returned to China in this way was not okay. That's because, well, you know the logic. As a result, was China's action premature? Yes. Was it legal? No. Was it understandable? Yes. Was it okay? Well, if everything went as planned, then it's okay. But it didn't. Two things. First, the administration of the Republic of China was terribly awful. And second, China Civil War. Let's start from the first, awful administration. After 25th October 1945, TPEO, i.e. the ROC's military occupation entity for the Allied powers, had done a very bad job. How bad? Well, we'll need another 10 episodes to talk about it. This news at that time can show you some essence. Anyway, within this context, on 27 February 1947, when the officers detecting a woman selling contraband tobacco accidentally killed a bystander, furious people went to the TPEO and asked for justice on the next day, but TPEO answered with machine guns. Many people were killed. Surviving protesters went to the nearby radio station and broadcasted this tragedy. After heard this broadcast, people all around Taiwan who had endured endless inhumane exploitation of TPEO and corrupted, greedy Chinese stood up and asked for administration reformation. Chen Yi, the top officer of TPEO, then asked Chiang Kai-shek, the head of state of the Republic of China, for help. Chiang responded to his request by sending armies of the Republic of China to Taiwan. After the reinforcement of the Republic of China arrived, ROC Army already on Taiwan and reinforcement joined to suppress the protest. and more than 20,000 lives were lost. A great part of the deceased were local opinion leaders, elites, gentry, and intellectuals. After the massacre, as an ironic comfort for Taiwanese sacrifice, on 16 May 1947, the TPO was replaced by TPG, Taiwan Provincial Government. Now, let's talk about China's Civil War. After 15 August 1945, in China, the Republic of China, represented by the Republic of China government, a war between two political parties was started. At this stage, the China Civil War was a war between two competing political parties in China. Chinese Nationalist Party, CNP, aka today's Kuomintang, KMT, and Chinese Communist Party, CCP. So, this is how the early stage of China's Civil War looked like. As you can see, the strength of CNP was stronger than the Soviet-backed CCP. But during the Civil War, on 5th January 1946, something happened. On this day, after a successful plebiscite, the Mongolia became an independent sovereign state. Okay, now let's go back to China's Civil War. As time went by, the CCP became stronger. The number of troops abandoning CNP for CCP increased dramatically. The defeat of CNP became inevitable. Then, on 23 April 1949, after a series of successful attacks, the CCP conquered Nanjing City, the location of the Republic of China's central government. The CNP then moved the central government to Guangzhou City. Few months later, on the 1st October 1949, a groundbreaking event happened. On this day, a new Chinese regime was established. The CCP established their own regime at Beijing City, the People's Republic of China regime. Now the army of CCP was no longer a private army of the CCP, but an army of a regime capable of becoming a sovereign state government. Since the 1st October 1949, in the sovereign state China, a war originally between two political parties competing for the status of the governing party then became a war between two regimes competing for the status of the government of China. In other words, the nature of China's civil war was changed from a war between two competing political parties in the Republic of China to a war between two competing regimes in the sovereign state China. Too complicated? No problem. Let's go back to the classroom. This time we use another metaphor. Suppose there is a manned robot, and this robot needs one pilot to operate. A sovereign state is just like a manned robot, and like a robot needs its pilot to operate, a sovereign state also needs its government to be functional. And like a one-man robot needs only one pilot, a sovereign state needs only one state government. To find one pilot for the robot, we need at least one pilot candidate. Likewise, to have one state government for the sovereign state, we need at least one regime established in this state. Of course, if more than one candidate want to be the robot pilot, then there will be a fight between candidates until the final winner appears. Similarly, if there are two regimes competing for the status of state governments, the civil war will be fought in the sovereign state they belong to until the final winner appears. However, before the war ends, how do we interact with the sovereign state China? Well, there is only one China and it can only have one government, but there are two regimes fighting for the status of state government. Then, to interact with China, we must ask, which regime is the China government? This is the essence of the problem of China's representative. So who needs to decide? Basically, anyone interacting with sovereign state China needs to do that. For example, other sovereign states and international organizations. Then, how to tell others your decision? Basically, each sovereign state can independently tell the world its decision by making public announcements or by establishing and breaking diplomatic relations. As for international organizations, besides independently making public announcements, they can also pass resolutions to declare their decisions. Furthermore, you can change your decision whenever you want for whatever reason or even no reason at all. That's right. Whenever you want, however you like, and as many times as you want. So what are the effects of the decision? First, it will decide how China looks in your eyes. Say, if you choose ROC regime today, in your eyes, the official name of the sovereign state China would be the Republic of China, ROC. Its capital city would be Nanjing City, and its national flag, national emblem, head of states, and claimed territories will be these. On the other hand, if you choose PRC regime instead, in your eyes, the official name of the sovereign state China would be the People's Republic of China, PRC. Its capital city would be Beijing City, and its national flag, national emblem, head of state, and claimed territories would be these. The second effect involves diplomatic relations. If you choose ROC, then the ROC regime will become the China government. It can have official diplomatic relation with you, sign international treaty on behalf of China, send envoy to represent the sovereign state China, and set China embassy on foreign soil. In this scenario, the PRC regime will become a local authority. It cannot have official diplomatic relation with other sovereign states, cannot sign international treaties, send envoy to represent China, or set embassy. On the other hand, if you choose PRC, then the PRC regime will become the China government. It can have official diplomatic relation with you, sign international treaty on behalf of China, and send envoy to represent the sovereign state China, and set China embassy on foreign soil. As for the ROC regime, it will become a local authority of China. It cannot have official diplomatic relation with other sovereign states. It cannot sign international treaties, send envoy to represent China, or set embassy. The third effect of this decision is about participation in international organizations. In an organization where China is already a member state, if this organization regards the ROC regime as the China government, then its representative can represent China in this organization, and the PRC regime's representative cannot even enter the door. However, if this organization later changed to PRC regime, then the PRC regime's representative will sit on China's seat, and the ROC representative will be expelled. In an international organization where China is not a member yet, the action chosen by this organization in respect of which regime is the China government will decide which regime can apply membership for the sovereign state China successfully. For example, if the ROC regime is chosen like here, then the situation will look like this. As you can see, the ROC regime has successfully applied membership for the sovereign state China, but the PRC regime's request is rejected, and its act to leave. On the other hand, if the PRC regime is chosen, then the result will be totally different. As you can see, now the PRC regime is the one successfully applying membership for the sovereign state China. As for the ROC regime, its application is not only rejected, and because the representative of China is already here, the ROC regime's existence is not even tolerated, and is requested to leave. This is the cruelty of international law and diplomacy. So, the question of which Chinese regime is the China government is very important. Now back to the stage. After the 1st October, the ROC regime lost almost every battle. On 14th October, the ROC regime moved to Chongqing. Then, on 13th November, it escaped to Chengdu, and finally, on 8th December, it moved to Taiwan. The Japanese territory, the ROC regime performed military occupation for the Allies and became a Chinese regime in exile. The ROC regime described this move as retreating to the last ground of China's civil war, but in fact, it simply escaped to a land that belonged to others. Nevertheless, because in the ROC regime's organizational structure, provincial government is inferior to the central government, so, in spite of the fact that the PPG was an entity of the Allies' military occupation, its administration power was largely taken away by the ROC regime. How other sovereign states mention the ROC regime on Taiwan is affected by their decision on China representative issue. For those recognizing the ROC regime may be called China government or the Republic of China government. As for those recognizing PRC regime, the ROC regime may be called Taiwan authorities, Taiwan governing authorities, Chiang Kai-shek regime, or the nationalist regime. Then, on the 8th September 1951, 48 members of the Allies signed the San Francisco Peace Treaty with Japan. In this treaty, Japan was required to renounce territorial sovereignty over all territories designated in Article 2, recognize the independence of Korea, and its occupation would be ended by 90 days after the treaty entered into force. By this treaty, Korea became independent. By this treaty, Taiwan is no longer part of Japan. By this treaty, these lands are no longer Japanese. By this treaty, these lands may be put under the UN's trusteeship. However, while this treaty set Japan free, this treaty also created disputes, and this treaty left land with undetermined status, where the arrangement of Allies military occupation must continue. On 28 April 1952, the San Francisco Peace Treaty entered into force. On this day, the status of Taiwan became undetermined. On the same day, Japan chose the ROC regime as the China government and signed a Sino-Japanese peace treaty with the ROC regime. In this treaty, first, the ROC recognized that Japan has renounced her sovereignty over Taiwan in San Francisco Peace Treaty. This means that the ROC recognized the status of Taiwan is undetermined. This is very important. That's because while in the Cairo Communique of 1943, the US, UK, and the Republic of China intended to ask Japan to return Taiwan to the Republic of China. In the San Francisco Peace Treaty, which the Republic of China had difficulty to sign, both the US and UK decided to leave the status of Taiwan undetermined. That is to say, two of the three sovereign states announcing the Cairo Communique had changed their minds from making Taiwan a sovereign territory of China to leave it undetermined, and the remaining sovereign state, China, recognized this change by Sino-Japanese Peace Treaty. The Cairo Communique was replaced as a result. Second, people on Taiwan who became stateless when the San Francisco Peace Treaty entered into force will be deemed as nationals of the Republic of China after the Sino-Japanese Peace Treaty entered into force. The Sino-Japanese Peace Treaty entered into force on the 5th August 1952. Since then, people on Taiwan were regarded as nationals of the sovereign state China represented by the ROC government. This kind of arrangement was fine for people on Taiwan at that time, since the ROC regime was generally recognized as a state government. It could connect with the world for people on Taiwan. While the United Nations initially recognized the ROC regime as a China government, it was changed later. On 25 October 1971, the representative of China sent by the ROC regime left the meeting room of the United Nations General Assembly before the Assembly passed the resolution number 2758, which recognized the PRC regime as the legitimate government of China in the United Nations. This resolution contains three things. First, UN as an international organization would now regard the PRC regime as the representative of China. Second, the representative of the ROC regime should be expelled and replaced by the PRC regime's representative. And third, all other international organizations under the UN system should do the same thing. Following the resolution, the ROC regime and people on Taiwan's road to the world was blocked. On 29 September 1972, Japan switched its recognition to the PRC regime. The ROC government was downgraded to the ROC regime, and the Sino-Japanese Peace Treaty between the ROC regime and the Japanese government was abolished as a result. Because the Sino-Japanese Peace Treaty was nullified, people on Taiwan were no longer regarded as the nationals of the ROC regime by the Japan government. Although people on Taiwan are not regarded as the ROC regime's nationals, but their road to the world is still blocked. However, we must understand that the question of which regime is the China government should be applicable only to the ROC regime, not the entity established for the Allies' military occupation. The ROC regime's road to the world is determined by others' decision. If the world recognizes it as the China government, the road is open. If not, the road is blocked. When Taiwan is represented by the Allied powers' military occupation entity, the road to the world should always be open. However, when Taiwan is represented by the ROC regime, if the world recognizes it as the China government, then the road is open. If the wind changes directions, then the road is blocked. Hence, the source of problem is the unrecognized China government, ROC, i.e., the ROC regime in exile. Yeah, I heard you, but the United Nations says that Taiwan is a province of China. Why? Well, let me tell you. On 24 October 1945, the sovereign state China, represented by the ROC government, became one of the founding states of the United Nations and one of the 5 permanent members of Security Council. Since the next day, in spite of the fact that Taiwan was merely put under the Allied powers' military occupation performed by China, the ROC government claimed that Taiwan has become a province of China. The ROC government persisted this position when the TPO was reformed into TPG. It kept this position after it fled to Taiwan and became a Chinese regime in exile. It also took the same position upon the signing and entering into force of the San Francisco Peace Treaty, until the United Nations prevented it from representing China on 25 October 1971. From 1945 to 1971, China, represented by the ROC regime, had told the world that Taiwan is a province of China for 26 years as a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations. After taking the seat in the United Nations, the PRC regime continued to repeat the same words till today. So we got an untold truth and a Chinese story told by 2 Chinese regimes. Now you may ask, I don't know this. Why? Well, that's because the Cold War. The Cold War is a near half-century competition between the capitalism supporters led by the US and the socialism supporters led by the Soviet Union. Many places were split into 2 parts during the Cold War, such as Germany, China, Korea, and Vietnam. Some of them became 2 sovereign states, and China took the form of 1 sovereign state, 2 regimes. During the Cold War, the anti-communist bloc did not challenge the ROC regime's territorial sovereignty claim over Taiwan for practical reasons, because the ROC regime, their anti-communist comrade, needed a place to stay. But this has a serious consequence. The actual situation with Taiwan was concealed for decades. After the Cold War, the ROC regime gradually changes from insisting its name is the Republic of China to today's the Republic of China, Taiwan, but it is still a Chinese regime. The self-identity image of people on Taiwan is affected by propaganda of the ROC regime. After 25 October 1945, the ROC regime's entity for the Allies' military occupation started to make people on Taiwan to consider themselves Chinese. After the ROC regime fled to Taiwan, the education of Chinese identity was intensified. The goal was to make people on Taiwan to be proud of being a Chinese and believe that the ROC regime is their sovereign state without any doubt. After losing the status of China government in the United Nations, while it was still important to make people on Taiwan to believe that they were Chinese, the efficacy was decreasing. Hence, after the ROC regime was democratized under pressure from people on Taiwan and the international community, the ROC regime shifted its strategy from marketing itself as the true China to branding itself as a democratized Chinese regime, and gradually concealed its Chinese nature and tricked people on Taiwan to believe that the ROC regime, the Chinese regime in exile, is not a Chinese regime but a sovereign state equaling to Taiwan. So what are the roots of problem? Well, there are a lot of them. People on Taiwan believe everything the ROC regime says, cannot see the Chinese nature of the ROC regime, don't know the existence of the Allied powers' military occupation, don't believe that the sovereignty of Taiwan is still undetermined, don't know they are stateless, and the deadliest one, they believe that the ROC regime is not a Chinese regime, but their non-Chinese sovereign state. Okay, so how to deal with this? At this moment, especially this. Some people believe that if everyone works harder, the wall will fall someday. Sorry, if you don't use the right way, this is not going to happen. You see, international organizations are like clubs only for robot pilots. To join parties thrown by this club, you must have a robot, and you must be the pilot of the robot. If you are really a robot pilot, then this is what will happen when you want to enter this club. You have the robot, and you can prove you are the pilot. Want to join the party? Easy, just come. On the other hand, if you did have a robot, and you was its only pilot, but later someone else took away your robot helmet, and now others think that the one taking away your helmet is the true robot pilot, then that guy can join the party as he wishes. As for you, you will not be able to even pass the club's doorman, no matter how hard you condemn them. By the way, if you don't have a robot, but only believe that you have a robot, or imagine others' robot is yours, then no matter how angry you are, you certainly cannot enter the club. Now, let's apply this to the RC regime's participation in UN. The sovereign state China does exist, and it was represented by the RC regime. Later, the UN passed Resolution 2758 on 25 October 1971 to recognize the PRC regime as the only China representative in UN. After that, only PRC regime can enter UN. As for the RC regime, it cannot even pass the front door. This is what actually happened in WHO. Since PRC regime is recognized as the representative of China, it entered WHO without any problems. However, the RC regime was refused. People on Taiwan were furious and condemned PRC and WHO for this. Then there were a series of old cliché conversations. The point is, it seems that people on Taiwan didn't really understand and listen what the RC regime said. Being refused made them angry, but they didn't really understand why Taiwan was refused, but just believed everything the RC regime said. The most classic case is that when the RC regime said it was the founding state of WHO, people on Taiwan comprehended it as Taiwan was the founding state of WHO. They didn't understand that RC regime was recognized as China government at that time. Repeating the RC regime's words like this is literally telling others that Taiwan is part of China. These kind of things happen in everywhere and almost every time. So, should people on Taiwan blame China for this? Absolutely. However, instead of blaming this one with full power, this one is actually the real problem. Some people believe that the source of problem is a name, so they suggest to correct the name of the RC regime. About this idea, well, remember this? No matter how the RC regime named Taiwan, it was still Japanese territory, right? Same logic. Sticking labels like this on the RC regime is useless, counterproductive, and self-deceiving. Its nature of a Chinese regime in exile cannot be changed in this way. Do you remember this? One China is a birdcage only for Chinese birds. Since China has never acquired Taiwan sovereignty after World War II, One China should never be applied to Taiwan. Do you remember this? Do you remember this? Why so? That's because the entity capable of administering Taiwan is not a Chinese entity. The Allied powers' military occupation is an operation of all Allied members of the World War II. All Allied members as a whole are the owner of military occupation rights, and members mentioned on the occupation plan, General Order Number 1, are the actual executors. They are empowered agents of all members of the Allies. The One China cage cannot and should not cover the Allied powers' military occupation entity in Taiwan. The Allied powers' military occupation entity can be a bridge between Taiwan and the world, but this is merely temporary. That's because in UN and its related organizations, although the Allied powers' military occupation entity can represent people on Taiwan as observer, it cannot become a member because only sovereign states can apply for membership in these organizations. Hence, the ultimate solution is for Taiwan to become an independent sovereign state. We must realize that the issue of Taiwan independence is not a Chinese issue. It is not a choice between reunification of China and separation from China. The true color of the issue of Taiwan independence is an unfinished decolonization job. This map depicts the ownership of colonies in Asia by the end of World War II. There are colonies of Japan, France, USA, Netherlands, Portugal, and UK. After World War II, decolonization became an international consensus. Within this context, many colonies became independent states. This is how Japanese colonies changed during the process. French colony changed in this way. The US colony changed in this way. Netherlands colony also changed. Portuguese colony changed in this way. As for British colonies, because the UK had the most colonies, so the number of independent states emerged is also the greatest. As you can see, Taiwan is certainly an unfinished job of decolonization in Asia. Why decolonization should be applied to Taiwan? First, Taiwan was a Japanese colony since 1895. Because Japan renounced her territorial sovereignty over Taiwan in 1952 without designating the successor, Taiwan became a former colony with undetermined status. Second, because the post-war disposition of Taiwan is still undetermined, the Allied powers' post-war military occupation arrangement is still effective. In other words, Taiwan is still a territory under Allied powers' military occupation. Finally, according to United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1514, decolonization should be applied to non-self-governing territories, and the lands under military occupation is certainly non-self-governing. Hence, decolonization should be applied to Taiwan. So you may ask, what can I do? Well, if you're a member of the legislature in any sovereign state, please spend some time to check related archives and confirm the facts mentioned in this video. Stop passing bills or resolutions demanding executive branch to form official diplomatic relations with the ROC regime. Stop pushing executive branch to form official diplomatic relations with the ROC regime, and use the facts you have confirmed to ask executive branches, especially the Department of Foreign Affairs, about their position on the status of Taiwan. And if you can find your national flag here, or your state was part of any state listed here, please ask the executive branch, especially the Department of Foreign Affairs, about executive branch's position on Taiwan's status based on San Francisco Peace Treaty. If the answer is unclear, request the executive branch to do research. Then pass a resolution to request the executive branch to support the entity of the Allied powers' military occupation to represent people on Taiwan in international organizations as observer, and request the executive branch to demand the UN to put Taiwan on the list of non-self-governing territories. If you are a public servant of a state government, please study related archives and confirm the facts mentioned in this video, and stop putting equal sign between the RC regime and Taiwan. And if you can find your national flag here, or your state was part of any state listed here, please consider your position on status of Taiwan based on San Francisco Peace Treaty. Then support the entity of the Allied powers' military occupation on Taiwan to represent people on Taiwan in international organizations as observer. Then request the UN to put Taiwan on the list of non-self-governing territories. If you are a nice person and you really love Taiwan and its people, please check related archives and confirm the facts mentioned in this video. Also, please stop requesting your government to form official diplomatic relations with the RC regime, but instead request your government to study the actual situation of Taiwan. And if you can find your national flag here, or your state was part of any state listed here, please ask your government, especially the Department of Foreign Affairs, about its position on Taiwan status based on the San Francisco Peace Treaty. If the answer is not clear, ask your government to do research. Then, ask your government to support the entity of the Allied powers' military occupation to represent people on Taiwan in international organizations as observer, and request your government to demand the UN to put Taiwan on the list of non-self-governing territories. To help Taiwan and its people, please stop calling this the national flag of Taiwan, and stop regarding the RC regime as the Taiwan government, because this will only put Taiwan and people on Taiwan into the one China cage. If you are Taiwanese and you really love Taiwan, and you hope Taiwan can join the world, please stop calling this the national flag of Taiwan, and stop regarding the RC regime as the state government of Taiwan, because this will only put Taiwan and you in the one China cage. Also, please stop requesting other sovereign states to form official diplomatic relations with the RC regime. Please stop banning international organizations like UN or WHO for not allowing the RC regime to enter. And please stop bothering international organizations for the RC regime's entry. Spend some time to check all related documents and confirm the truth. Then request the RC regime to first reveal the truth about Taiwan's actual situation. Request it to admit that it is merely a Chinese regime in exile, and request it to transfer the administration power to the revealed military occupation entity of the Allied powers. By doing so, you can effectively release Taiwan and its people from the one China cage. Then you can request the Allied powers' military occupation entity to first represent people on Taiwan in international organizations as observer, then request the entity to ask the UN to put Taiwan on the list of non-self-governing territories to initiate the process of decolonization. If you are a public servant of the RC regime, especially a diplomat, and you really love Taiwan, you can study the archive and check the facts. Then tell the people on Taiwan the truth you find. Allow them to ask the RC regime to make things right. Under people of Taiwan's rightful pressure, the RC regime will first reveal the truth about Taiwan's actual situation, admit that it is merely a Chinese regime in exile, and transfer the administration power to the revealed military occupation entity of the Allied powers. This will release Taiwan, people on Taiwan, and these local governing authorities, i.e., the military occupation entity of the Allied powers, from the One China cage. Then, the Allied powers' military occupation entity can first represent people on Taiwan in international organizations like UN and WHO as observer. Then ask UN to put Taiwan, the former Japanese colony under its occupation, on the list of non-self-governing territories to initiate the process of decolonization. After placing Taiwan on the list of non-self-governing territories, the Allied powers' military occupation entity will hold a plebiscite for people on Taiwan to decide the future of their land. In this plebiscite, if people on Taiwan decide to establish a sovereign state, Taiwan will then become one. Its people will establish a state government, and the Allied powers' military occupation entity will transfer the administration power to the new government and dissolve. After that, the new government of the Taiwan state will represent its people to shake hands with this world. Taiwan can help the world. The world can help Taiwan. Please take action now. Please check the facts mentioned in this video and share this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me through the following methods.